Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Ask Me Anything with the founder and lead visionary for Blockcerts International, Mr. Tim Vasko. Good morning, Tim.
Hey, Jay, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Another beautiful day in
Great.
blockchain world.
It certainly is. The sun's always shining in blockchain world.
So, Tim, we have a ton of questions, and they're pretty meaty ones, so we'll try and get through as many as we can. The first one is kind of a timely topic. I have Roberta who asked, I'm getting a lot of emails about GDPR, and she doesn't understand, first of all, what is GDPR and why are people asking me to resubscribe? I've already subscribed to these newsletters and emails that I'm getting, and now they're asking me to do it again. Could you explain what's going on with privacy and what's going on with the European Union?
Yeah, GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation out of Europe. And basically, the concept is that with all of these breaches like Equifax and Facebook and now Google is in the firing line, the European Union's been working on these new very stringent regulations that require new policies, new disclosure policies, and if there's a data breach, what the exact procedures are that have to be followed, and it's very involved. So essentially what's happened is everybody who has mailing lists, email lists in particular that you're getting these from, it's a global world. So there's likely people all over the world, and rather than splitting it out by, oh, this is just Europe, or this is the United States, or this is Canada, or whatever, they're just blasting it to everybody. And this is happening all over the world. What it means is that the stringent regulations on privacy and security are here to stay. Governments are taking it very seriously, and now companies need to figure out a way to comply. And so as a result, what we're seeing is these massive shifts. I think I read a stat just yesterday that the Fortune 500 companies, just to comply with GDPR, will spend $7.8 billion. So it's a huge issue, and obviously we've been talking a lot about blockchain and how authentication and protection of privacy is done with that. GDP is incredibly relevant to what we're doing. I think outside of the Fortune 500 companies spending $7.8 billion, the total estimated cost of compliance in GDPR is now, I think $96 billion is what's expected in 2018 that's going to be spent. So if anybody ever questioned about how you monetize blockchain at a minimum, there's a start.
Wow. Well, that makes sense. I know my inbox has been flooded with people telling me you have only 2 more days to update your subscription preferences or you'll lose us forever. And it's like, okay, go through it's a good way to weed out some of those unwanted emails, right?
It is, and it's important, and I think it's a good first step. In fact, if you watched any of the Zuckerberg testimony in the United States, I didn't watch the European one because I'm sure it was more of the same, but the question did come up to Zuckerberg, should we in the United States be doing what Europe did? And this was before GDPR became official, which was May 25th. And the answer that Zuckerberg gave is, well, I don't know if Europe has the right answer, but we should do something. So I think the important thing is it's a broadcast to the world and to all of us that we need to think about our data, worry about our data, and these big centralized authorities are not going to come away scot-free. Just a few days after GDPR came into force, is $8.8 billion is the lawsuit currently going on against Google and Facebook for privacy and data breaches. There's no question that corporations are going to be concerned, and that might be in court for a long time. The point is, it is a very real thing now, and it's at the regulation level. So everything from government to the individual is now a citizen of what has to happen with authentication and privacy, and that's what our blockchain's about.
Wouldn't it be nice if somebody came to you and said, hey, you're sending me unauthorized emails, and you could go to your blockchain records and say, well, on this device, you subscribed at this date, and we'll be happy to take you off our list, but you know, you did subscribe, so you have proof of every single person that's in your community.
That's precisely what's going to happen, and I got some good news, Jay. We already do that. We already have it, and it's all hashed to the chain. In fact, that's our very first test right now going on behind the scenes, and you can look at every time somebody opens a link, clicks a link, views a log, and subscribes to an email, unsubscribes to an email. We've got a full audit trail, 100% audit trail. So when a regulator comes in and says, you did this, you say, nope, didn't do it. That's exactly what happened. And that will form regulation, and it also cover both the individuals and the companies.
Great. And then, Tim, the next question is actually a two-pronger. We have two questions that are very closely aligned, so I'm just going to combine them. And they both concern small business. And one question is about, I'm currently using a number of different software as a service suites to run my business. I have a CRM program to keep in touch with my customers. I have an email program. I have a file sharing program. How will blockchain change that? And then the other question that's attached to that is, how will the GDPR affect small businesses? Because a lot of them don't have the resources that the big guys do to go out and do all these email blasts and get the compliance and be able to show the regulators that they have that in place.
Yeah, well, first of all, let me answer the first piece, which is how will blockchain change the way software is delivered? When you look at software the way it's designed, they were all of these companies are independent companies. So Dropbox, DocuSign, Salesforce.com, MailChimp, Constant Contact, FreshBooks, they're all independent companies, and they all have their own business model. And your data that you use all those different tools for is in different places. And I'm sure that you see that every single day when you go to look for something. So the first problem with that, when you come down to running a business, is it's confusing. Like at the most basic thing, it's confusing, and it doesn't all integrate easily with each other. You're looking here in your email for something, and there in your Outlook contacts, and there in your CRM, and there in your email marketing, and you're creating a list in one place and pushing it to another. That is very difficult at best, but it's the way software has been built because it was logical to build it that way from a business model perspective for these big centralized authorities to start charging their seat fees and their license fees that you pay. Now, the problem today is if you've got all that data in multiple places, guess who's responsible if there's a breach in any one of them? And that's the small business challenge. So where the Fortune 500 say, you know what, this is really inconvenient. It's going to hit our balance sheets and our income statements by 0.1% that we spent $7.8 billion. Small businesses don't have those kind of resources. And also, large enterprises, for the most part, are already decentralized. That's what most people don't understand. Like, clearly, HSBC is all over the world with a decentralized business model. Not distributed, decentralized. There's a distinct difference between those two that I'll get into at some other point. But the idea that they can then implement something across their ecosystem makes a lot of sense. A small business has to build that, unless you have all those tools that do work together in one place and you have a blockchain. Then you get back to what I said before, which is you now have an easy audit trail. It's easier to find things, so life gets easier, as well as if there's any issue or question, you simply click a button, boom, there's what happened. And it's going to be really obvious that you either violated the law or you didn't. That can be handled by a GDPR template, a templated smart contract that just says, here's what our policy is, accept it or not. If you accept it, this is what we're going to do. And as long as your smart contract and your tools that you put in are designed that way, which is what the Blockcert system allows you to do, you're great. You're golden. So that's how small businesses will utilize blockchain. And the big bonus on the back of that is it just gets easier to run your business. And so I call it smart business.
Great, and that kind of answers the second question, because the small businesses don't have the resources, but if they could sign up with Blockcerts and run their business using the Blockcerts blockchain and the tokens and the applications that we're developing, then they can do everything that they're currently doing without having to pay all those seat fees and just pay for the amount of resources that they're actually using.
That's exactly right. And one thing I do want to point out is not every business has to use these applications. In Blockcerts, they come with it, but there's also integration. So if you've got a specialty system, say you're in the fishing business, or you're in the carpet cleaning business or something, and there's very specialty systems for that, that's great. And some of those systems are fantastic. We can easily plug that in, and now you're on the blockchain, you get all these other benefits, and you can continue to use your existing system. So not everybody has to change to adopt this. We've built it both ways, and it has to be. We believe in adopting both the existing systems to make people's lives easier and provide access and collaboration, as well as bringing all these new tools to bear to provide what's needed or demanded today and the way things actually work and what the regulations as well as business is today. So
interesting, because you just hit on the topic of the next question, which was, I've heard you guys talk about allowing people to build applications on top of your blockchain. Exactly how does that work? And this comes from a software developer out of Brazil.
Well, there's a full library for developers that we already have. It's got application program interfaces, APIs. We also have a software developer kit, and it's a full stack kit that allows you to code any smart contract. It allows you to code any what we call gadgets, and gadgets are like apps that talk to each other. In fact, it's what my patent was around originally. So this allows for the integration and the hashing to the chain. So one of the really important things is that if you want to adopt blockchain, we want to make it less geeky and a lot easier to do with, for developers in particular, a very, very fast learning curve. The technology we've used, primarily Microsoft and C# and JavaScript and all of that, are broad languages. Most everybody can do this, and you can just use these tools to integrate anything you're doing. So be as creative as you want. Build whatever application you want. If you want to be, I don't know, think of something like maybe somebody who's going to disrupt the taxi industry. That'll never happen, but if they did, and they might call it Uber, they would build on something called at the Apple iStore, your iTunes Store. Actually, that's exactly what happened. Would Uber exist if Apple didn't exist? And would it exist if mobile devices didn't exist? We've built a deck and a platform to do that for developers. Right now, you have to contact us and become a trusted developer. Once you are, go nuts, build whatever you'd like.
And ultimately, that provides more value to the Blockcerts token holders because they'll have access to these specialized applications and they just pay for what they use. Is that right?
Yeah, that kind of gets us to ink and a description of how that works, and I can go into that if you'd like.
Yeah, that would be great because we did have a question from somebody who had heard about ink on a previous podcast and they wanted a little better explanation of what that is and what it means.
Okay, so the way it works is, and I'm going to describe this in terms of the App Store. Assume that there's an app that you download and it's 99 cents. So you download that app, it's 99 cents or it's even free, and the app does something. It makes a reservation at a restaurant or what have you, just like we see today. In the case of the initial app at Blockcerts, which is called Be Certain, you'll be able to share files, you'll be able to do contracts, and you'll be able to authenticate in the first version coming out this summer. And what happens is, for that, there will be a compute charge or a transaction fee. Now, this is very, very common in the world of blockchain. And the way most people know of it is called mining. So data miners, what they do is they do the calculation, create the hash, it pushes to the chain, and for that, they make a reward. In some cases, they get a Bitcoin. In some cases, they get what's called Ether or gas on Ethereum. Right now on Ethereum, as of yesterday, the transaction cost was 19.4% for every 19.4 US dollars for every transaction, so 19 cents. So what happens with ink is it's the same thing. If we are exactly the same average as Ethereum and it's 19 cents, then the developer will get a piece of that for the app that's being used. The token holder will get a piece of that, and Blockcerts will get a flat 20% of that. Apple takes 30% of every app that comes off the App Store for anything that happens, whether it's in-app purchases or it's 99-cent download or a $9.99 download. We will get 20%. That's what we'll pay for all of the compute charges and Blockcerts, and the token holders and the app developers will get everything. So that model will basically take what's happening in mining and shift all those revenues that you hear go into miners. We're paying for all those computers and electric and everything like that, and it'll give it to our Blockcerts token holders. And it gets rid of the problem of mining, which isn't sustainable anyway. I think I heard one mine right now I can't remember where it was, somewhere in the United States, could power 5 million homes. So it's not a sustainable model with this mining. This is a sustainable model because we all can mine. We can use our telephones to mine. So that's how it works. It's really, really pretty straightforward. If it's 20 cents minimum to do a transaction, then 4 cents is going to go to Blockcerts to cover the costs of operating the network. That'll all be done through a smart contract on the blockchain, so it can see how it's allocated, and the balance of it goes to the people who develop the app or who are the token holders, which makes our tokens, as I did the calculation yesterday, Jay, look really a bit too cheap. That we're selling them for 10 cents right now.
Well, good thing we're about to raise the price on June 22nd.
So anyway, I don't know if that helped, but that
does help. It puts ink into perspective, I think. And if anyone out there has any questions on that, feel free to get in touch with us or ask right now. We have the chat window and the Q&A window open for questions. But I have one other question pending right now, and that's a gentleman, Dr. Faraday, and he works in the highly regulated healthcare industry. And he's worried about HIPAA. And Dr. Faraday is actually a researcher, and what he has said is he sees a lot of problems with sharing data. It's very difficult for doctors and researchers to collaborate because of the HIPAA practices and restrictions. Could you see a way that blockchain may be able to enable these people to collaborate in a more straightforward manner?
Yeah. Again, think about that specialty app that I just talked about, where healthcare is an excellent example because almost every medical practice now and hospital has some kind of an EHR, electronic health record system. The problem is, again, it's all siloed technology. Everyone has its own flavor. Some hospitals have spent hundreds of millions of dollars of installing these things and maintaining them. And whether they're good or bad or easy to use or hard to use or whatever is kind of irrelevant. What we do is we look for what are the critical points of information to share. And we use a pretty unique model between the public and the private blockchain. So the public ledger that creates immutability and trust, and then the privacy, which means it's all encrypted. And we use a double hashing mechanism. So when we integrate with one of those EHRs or a bunch of EHRs, when the data comes out, it actually gets hashed to a hash before it goes to the blockchain, the Blockcerts blockchain, which is another hash. So it makes it pretty unlikely that any of those, it makes it almost impossible to unravel that and get back to the actual data. So the first thing is that enables collaboration. The second thing is, because we've done that, these hashes now know each other. So they're cousins, and because they're cousins, they can talk to each other really, really simply. And when somebody queries it and they want some information, they can get either de-identified or identified information or advice, and a whole bunch of things are going to open up as a result of that. Research and intellectual property will be hashed, so we'll know the first person to ever put it up there. So it's like a patent real time. It's in order, it's got a serial number, and yes, Jay Goth came up with that idea and patent and put it up there first. And there will be no refuting that. That eliminates that concern. It eliminates the concern of well, here's the data and here's my question, but who's the patient? We don't need to know. All we know is it's a number, but here's the problem we're trying to solve. So solve the problem for this number, and the only people that can unlock that number and know where it actually needs to go is the doctor and the patient. And maybe in some cases, just the doctor because he hasn't given it to the patient yet, or just the patient because they haven't given it to the doctor. So when you think about that, it allows collaboration across the metric of healthcare. And healthcare has always used a thing called SOAP notes, and it stands for, I'm going to get this wrong, this has been a while, but it's standards, objectives, standards, outcomes, I can't remember. I'm sorry. But the SOAP note is this wiki it, and the SOAP note is the chart that goes into an electronic health record. And what it basically says is, what are the standards? What are the objectives of this care? What are the quantitative and analytics? And what are the subjective? It's not standards, it's subjective. What are the subjective outcomes that the patient's experienced? All of that's really relevant. And now you can start seeing how not only HIPAA can be utilized, but so can AI and those kinds of things to help diagnose, treat, and even personalize medicine. Because it's all private, and it's only unlocked by those private keys held by Blockcert token holders.
Great. And then a follow-up from Dr. Faraday was just simply, if I have my own EHR in my Blockcerts record, can I decide who I share it with, and is each of those going to be a smart contract, or how does that work? Because he still seems to be a little unclear on how you can collaborate between different silos of information.
So the way it works is the silos that will have the information will hold the private key. And if they hold the private key, then clearly that key has the information behind it. that is human readable, in other words. So when you're on the blockchain, the hash on the blockchain relates back to the hash that holds that private key, and it will redirect it to wherever that information exists. And on your user interface on the screen that you see, what you'll see is the information you need back. You'll be able to communicate privately on it. And again, it can be de-identified patient information. It can be timed shared patient information, but it will all follow whatever that protocol of HIPAA is in the smart contract. And what permissions did the patient give you to actually utilize this information?
Great. Well, that answers a question for Dr. Faraday. And obviously, Doctor, if you have any further questions, feel free to contact us directly. So
I would say we can demonstrate how that works, Jay. So we can show that today.
Terrific. Then we're coming up on our final question, and this is from Debbie, and she says, listen, I'm just a consumer, but I am worried about my privacy, and I really don't like the idea of social media sharing everything that I have, when I post it. I'd really like to do this in a better way. Is blockchain going to enable me to share information with the people that only I trust instead of plastering it all over the place?
I think that's probably the most basic thing that we're doing first, which is authentication of individuals, and everything we just talked about, from a small business customer and GDPR to a patient health record, to all this more complicated application stuff, basically boils down to this. When you later this summer are able to go on and download your Be Certain app, and you hash your identity to the blockchain, you're now able to put all of your information through that, and then you can tell Facebook or or LinkedIn or Twitter or Google, this is my hash. If you want to use my information, this is how I'll allow you to use it, or don't use my information. And then if they want to, they have to ask you. That's not how it's done today. It's actually turning the model on its head. Today, companies say, if you want to use our software, we get to use your information. What we're doing with Be Certain application, the Be Certain app and the Blockcert token, is we're saying, if you want to use my information and you want me to use your service, then you have to adhere to how I want to protect my identity and my privacy. And you know what? That's how it should be. And that's how it actually works. When I go to a store, I walk in and I walk out on my terms. I don't have to buy something to walk into most stores. I don't have to give up my name or my identity to walk into a store and look at the shelves. But on the internet, that has been turned on its head. And the companies say, look, the minute you walk in, I can use anything about you. That's changing, and it's changing right now. To control that and to make sure that you do have control of walking in and out on your terms, that's what Blockcerts, the Be Certain token, and the Be Certain app are all about.
Great. And then to follow up with Dr. Faraday, he just asked another question. He said, if I own my own health data and researchers want to use it, can I set the terms to which they can use it? Can I actually charge for my own health data?
Actually, I had a great breakfast this morning with a doctor, and we talked about that. And it got to be a very exciting conversation for all of us at the table. But the point is that every discipline, whether it's healthcare or research, always worries about IP. My son, who I've mentioned before, is finishing his PhD, and he's worried about his intellectual property prior to publishing and copywriting and things like that. So what you can do is you can take your data, you can take your ideas, you can take your thoughts, and you can put it on the chain, and you have the right to put it out there, pull it back. Important thing is you get to mark it effectively, timestamp it, put a key on it, and say you can use it for this amount of time, and then I'm taking it back away. We even have some tools now that we're bringing out where you can display it on the screen and nobody can really copy it, or we can even black out the screen so you can't screenshot it. So there's a lot of ways to do that in addition to putting it on the chain. So your protection of information, which really holds a lot of researchers back, is now maybe even more secure than actually getting that patent granted. Remember, even if you have a patent granted, you now have to go fight whoever took your information and used it. So what we're doing again is we're protecting it at the source and making that very, very clear. Who was the first person to ever do this? And that's how you can control your personal or professional health data.
And I'm assuming, Tim, that if a researcher wants to use your health data and you decide, well, it must be worth something, that you could work out something in a smart contract where you could actually charge them for that.
Absolutely. And think of it this way. You could even put in something like this, which is, we realize this is for the good of science, but Mr. Multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical company, if you end up using this and it comes up with a new drug, you get to share some of those profits with me. Think about that.
Wow.
So not only did I help you invent that with my information, I get rewarded for helping you invent it. Doesn't it make the world a lot more collaborative?
Right. Now you're incentivizing people to share.
That's right. And to tell the truth and everything else. And for the pharmaceutical companies to say, hey, we want your information, and we've been successful this many times at monetizing a drug for multi-billions of dollars that controls blood pressure. So, by the way, here's our smart contract. Jump on into our research project and you'll be rewarded. That's the open structure organization we won't get into right now, but that's what it means, is everybody who helps gets a little piece of the pie. It actually helps distribute this. And where that money comes from is cost savings in holdups and legal costs and middlemen and everywhere else. We're spending it anyway. It's just that we're spending it on inefficiency.
Great, Tim. Well, you just blew my mind with that idea, but that's what blockchain's all about, is pushing the frontiers of what we can think about. And I appreciate your time today. Everyone, thanks for coming on and asking these questions. We really appreciate it. Every Friday at 11 o'clock Pacific time, we have Ask Me Anything, and we invite you to come back and bring some friends with you, because the more questions, the more opinions, the more collaborative we can be, and we really appreciate it.
And thank you, everybody. This is only going to happen with the support of all the people who are listening to us and helping us and bringing Blockcerts tokens into their businesses and lives. So we can't thank you enough. We are writing history right now, and you're part of it. So that's what it's all about. Thanks for collaborating with us at Blockcerts International.
Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you Friday.